Hello and welcome to another episode of Where Do We Begin? My name is Harper. It's another bonus episode today for you guys all to enjoy. As always, I'm your only host today. Lockie's not here for the bonus episodes. He's a busy man. And I'm busy getting all these bonus episodes out for you to enjoy. But it's a bit of a different bonus episode today because in the other bonus episodes, we've had some best of compilations with quizzes and life philosophies and some Aussie icons, highlights of our chats with them. I suppose this chat today that you'll hear is actually kind of a best of, if I'm honest, because it's the best chat I've had with this man. He goes by the name of Craig Wessels. You might know him for the podcast, Yank on the Footy. He's the Yank on the Footy. You probably know him if you've listened to this podcast or for a while as well, because we give him a shout out quite a bit. He's been on the podcast before, of course, on a grand final preview. But yeah, I had a chat with him on this morning being the 16th, the day before this episode comes out. It was really interesting to get a different perspective from someone that's outside this bubble on footy. He had a chat about how he got into footy and his life and career, and what I really liked as the host and the facilitator more than the answerer of the questions on the podcast. I don't usually get to express my opinions too much, but I really enjoyed the chat about the state of the footy media and the media in general and rule changes and this 24/7 cycle of AFL footy news that we've got going, and the outrage, the clickbait, all of that. And I heard some good arguments from Craig. I feel like I put some good arguments up myself. But yeah, I'm pretty hungry actually, so I'm probably going to wrap this intro up now. I hope you enjoy this episode with Craig Wessels, the Yank on the Footy. I'll see you back in the outro. Enjoy. Okay, and I'm delighted to welcome onto the show now a real friend of the show, maybe even the best friend of the show. He's known for his work on the Yank on the Footy podcast. Goes by the name of Craig Wessels. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Thank you, Harper. Thanks for having me back on again. Great to be talking with you on this, very snowy night here in Ohio.
Yeah, well, we're in a very lockdown situation here in Melbourne, which is why we're doing all these bonus podcasts. It's a pleasure to have you on. But before we get into a bit of footy chat, about your podcast, you've got some big news. You've spoken about it a bit on social media, released it to your fans. Do you want to let our fans know about your big news?
Well, first of all, I'm thrilled that you think I have fans. I have a few people that are tuning in to listen, so maybe they are fans. Yeah, that's true. A few weeks ago, I had somebody reach out to me just out of the blue on Facebook. They sent me a direct message, and it wasn't, I had no idea who this person was, and they had told me that they worked at a radio station in the Gippsland area in I think it's southeastern Victoria, if I'm not mistaken. It looked right along the coastline, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. And they do the morning show on Triple M in Gippsland, which I know Triple M. I'll tune in to listen to radio broadcasts of the games from time to time. And she said that she had just transferred there from a station up in Queensland, and she was from Queensland and she'd relocated to Victoria. She was a huge rugby fan. And I know there are two different levels of rugby in Australia, and I'm really not familiar with either one of them, so I don't want to get the wrong one. So she's a rugby fan. I don't know which club. And she said that she felt like now she's in kind of the heart of footy, that she needs to learn the game of footy. And she found my podcast online and reached out to me and asked if I would want to come on her radio show once a week during the season to just, spend 3 or 4 minutes talking about footy news, my views on the games, that type of thing. And I said, well, where do I sign up? So it's just been, it's been really exciting because it's going to be, an opportunity for me to talk to people about this game that I've fallen in love with, people who have grown up loving this game, people who I appreciate their passion for this game. And hopefully they'll recognize that I've developed that passion for it, and they'll not just say, "Oh, it's just some dumb yank that's trying to talk about our game." And I'm hoping to do it justice. As she said, we'll record however long we need to, and then we'll edit it down. So hopefully she'll make me sound good. But I think it's going to start in the next couple of weeks, because I mentioned to her about the AFLW season. I actually sent her a link to the replay page, which right now you can go back and watch all the AFLW replays right on their website, which is, I think, really, really smart on their part to do that. So I'm thrilled about this opportunity. It's what the heck is it called? It's called Anna for Breakfast, I think, is the name of her show. Yep. Anna Dare is her name, and so I'm thrilled that she reached out. I'm very appreciative of her reaching out, and hopefully this lead to more people tuning into the podcast as well. So hopefully it's a win. Hopefully it's a win-win.
Exactly. Hopefully for you. And I know if there's one thing Australians like, it's Americans giving us their attention, because we just love that down here. Giving attention to our game makes us feel very proud, I've got to say. And listening to your podcast, seeing what you tweet, it's really good to see the game getting a bit of attention from abroad.
Well, yeah, it is. And it's been a great, few years, having started following this game. And I really started following it a little bit in 2016, really got involved in 2017, got my first purchase of the Watch AFL app, I think was in 2018. And it's been, now this is my second year as a member of the club that I support, of the Cats. So, and that they get the Watch AFL app along with that. So it's great to support them, but it's great to be able to watch as many games as I can. And I've already watched all 7 games in the AFLW this weekend. Yeah. So,
just on that, actually, I want to know, how did the Cats become your team? There are 18 teams, a lot of teams to choose from. The Cats, not an unpopular team, but not one of the biggest teams in the league. So how'd you come across the Cats? How did you choose them?
The best thing I could say is, best thing I could recommend is go back and listen to the first episode of my podcast, which is came out in December of 2019, which is where I covered this. But I'll give you so go ahead and listen to that by all means. I'll give you the gist of it. When I was starting to follow the game a little bit more closely, and I was realizing, this is something I want to pay a lot of attention to. And part of this, has to do with what we were talking about off air, is that I tend to be quite a bit of a homebody. As I was joking with you, I said, this whole social distancing thing, I was an expert at it long before COVID, was ever heard of. But I started watching the games, and I actually started filling out like Google spreadsheets, looking at, how teams had done over the previous 15 years, their records, what was the percentage? I mean, I figured out what the percentage meant at that point in time. And I was looking at it, and I actually narrowed it down to 3 clubs at that point in time. Part of me was thinking, I knew that, that the bulk of the clubs, or, half the clubs, were in the city of Melbourne.
Yep.
And, I thought, you had the 2 clubs in Sydney as well, another big city, but then there were some other smaller cities, that had clubs. And I was kind of narrowing down, well, which one do I want to support? I kind of looked away from the big cities, although I did have it narrowed down to, I had one in the final 3. One of the big clubs in Melbourne was in my final 3. Yep. And I had it narrowed down to Geelong and to Brisbane and to, some of you may turn it off here in just a second.
Block your ears. I know what you're going to say here.
The third one was Collingwood. Oh. Okay, now here's why. My daughter's nickname when she was a little girl was Magpie. That was the reason why I almost went with them. Okay, my school colors are black and white. Where I'm a teacher, those are our school colors are black and white. I almost went with that.
So why didn't you go with it then?
It went back to that big city thing again. Yeah, I felt, to me, I kind of felt like I was going to be supporting an underdog. Somebody who's not the big city club is going to be getting all of the attention, and it turns out looking back at it, hindsight, the Cats have had quite a bit of success. I think I would have been pretty well off whichever one of those final two, Brisbane or Geelong, I had chosen, because both of them are, I think, very likely to be top 4 clubs this year.
Exactly.
And Geelong better be a top 4 club this year with everything they did in the offseason.
Yeah.
they better be, or they may be a bottom 4 club here in a couple of years.
Exactly. It's this season or bust really for them, hey.
Yes, it is. So that's kind of the gist. And I had one player, and this is what has been mind-boggling for some people. I had one player that just jumped off the screen to me watching the games on television. And I don't know if I've mentioned this to you on your podcast before. Okay, but if you haven't heard me tell this story before, that player is not who you'd be thinking. It's not Tom Hawkins. It's not Joel Selwood. It's not Paddy Dangerfield. It was Nakia Cockatoo. And he was just, when I was watching him play early on, and again, I didn't know who Tom Hawkins was. I didn't know who Paddy Dangerfield was or Joel Selwood. I had no concept of who they were in relationship to the grand scheme of things with footy. To me, watching the Nakia Cockatoo play, he looked to me like a linebacker in the NFL a little bit playing footy. He just was running people over and just, had a lot of speed and just went, I'm using a technical term here, just went balls to the wall. And he kept, he was getting injured, fairly frequently. Now he's with Brisbane now, and it sounds like his training is going very well. And I sent him a note, or I posted a note after he was traded to Brisbane, kind of outlining how I'd become a fan of the Cats because of him. And he put a little smiley face or the thumbs up thing on Instagram. So it was just, I'd love to get him on for an interview on the podcast, but we shall see. Maybe I'll figure out how to do that sometime down the road.
Yeah, great interview for him.
And I have one that I'm, it's a husband and wife that are older than I am, and they, her husband is a physician, so he's been extraordinarily busy over this last year with everything going on related to COVID. But she has said they would love to come on the podcast. They're both Cat supporters, but for 20 years or so, they housed like first-year Cats players in their home with them. Yeah, and one of the years they actually had Joel Selwood and Tom Hawkins living with them during the same year, during their first years at the club.
Wow!
So I'm looking forward to having them on just to hear some of the stories about the players that they had, and again, I'm hoping that will lead to a network of other host families with other clubs, that sort of thing. Because again, my podcast, I don't want it to be a Cats centric podcast. I'm trying to learn as much as I can about the Cats, but I'm trying to learn about the game itself, on a much wider scale. Yeah, that's really good. And I bet there would be some good stories about 18, 19-year-old Tom Hawkins and Joel Selwood running amok in that household. So, that definitely would be interesting. I think it would be great to hear some of those stories, Yeah. So, are you expecting a premiership from the Cats this year? Is that is that the target, do you reckon? I think they have a very decent shot at it. Yeah. But, I will, when it comes time for me to do my ladder predictions for the year, I have not done them yet. I have a feeling I will have them playing in the grand final. I honestly, I think it's going to be a repeat of last year's grand final. Because again, Richmond are the premiers until somebody knocks them off. And they have been in the time that I've been watching footy, they've been kind of that one mountain that Geelong has had a real tough time climbing. Yeah, 100%. And I'm hoping, bringing Jeremy Cameron in, having another, tall key forward down there is gonna do a number of different things. It's gonna take double teams away from Tom Hawkins, because who are you going? Are you going to leave Jeremy Cameron alone? You're going to still put two guys. Are you going to still put two guys on Hawkins? Go ahead. Jeremy Cameron's going to kick 70 goals.
Yeah.
You
You
know,
need two elite
and I think
defenders to stop that.
what it's also going to do, what I think it's also going to do then is it's going to open up. And I've mentioned this in an episode on my podcast. I said I'm not saying he's going to become this person, but I think that Brian Myers has some similar characteristics to Dusty Martin. He's not Dusty Martin.
Wow. Yeah.
But I think he could be that. He could be that guy. You know, being able to kick the ball at those odd angles that he kicks it. I think he could be that person that is just cleaning up the mess in front of the goal, like Dusty does, like Dusty did in the second half of the grand final. Yeah, against the Cats. So I'm thinking that they've got a very legitimate shot this year. You know, and we'll see what happens. Yeah,
and just from a Richmond standpoint, Richmond point of view, like I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I really wouldn't be surprised if Richmond kind of fell off a bit this year, because we've seen that happen with teams that have had those dynasties. And the year after they win, like Hawthorn, they won the premiership in 2013, 14, 15, and then the next year they got knocked out in an elimination final, I think, or maybe it was a semi-final, by the Bulldogs, knocked out in straight sets, I believe. So anything can happen. And honestly, I would be quite surprised if it was the Geelong-Richmond grand final, because I don't think it happens often enough with two teams, the top two teams from the season prior being the top two teams again, because all of these equalisation things that AFL's brought in, there's so much change. And that's true. A team like, a Fremantle coming up a bit and surprising everyone, maybe finishing in the top 6 or so. I know Essendon could surprise a few people from a selfish standpoint. I hope that happens. You might not think not yet. Not looking very optimistic there, Craig. Yeah, I think that I don't know, but I think it could be West Coast. You can't look away from Port Adelaide again. You know, Port's going to be back there again. I think Brisbane's going to be back up there. You know, to me, I would be scared to death, you know, having to, if, and this goes back to the guy that turned me into a Cat supporter, if Micaiah Cockatoo is healthy, how do you defend against him and Charlie Cameron coming down the grounds together? Yeah. I mean, those guys are both faster than, you know, a lot of other players that are out there. And, you know, adding Danaher in with Hipwood. I mean, if he's healthy, I mean, you're right. It may not be Richmond. It may not be Geelong. It might be Brisbane and Port Adelaide, or Brisbane and West Coast, or West Port
Coast.
Adelaide's an interesting one, actually, because I think they had that, I'm not sure what year it was. Maybe it was 2014, that year where they made the prelim and just lost to Hawthorn. I'm not sure if you would know it, but
that's before my time.
Yeah, and then the year after, they just slid completely and were no good for 3 or 4 years. So we might see another thing like that, where last year they did an amazing job finishing top of the ladder, and then. But maybe that was their chance. Maybe they've missed their chance. I don't know. Maybe they haven't missed their chance. Maybe they're going to be good for the next 5 years. But you just don't know. And we really have to wait and see until some games start playing out in a month or so's time. Yeah,
well, they got the community round coming up here in about 3 weeks.
Something like that.
Because they canceled. They canceled one of the rounds for the preseason games. There's only going to be one preseason game this year.
Yeah, well, I think the clubs are allowed to organise their own things. So if Port Adelaide want to go down the road and play against Adelaide, behind closed doors thing, they can if they want. I think Essendon might be playing Melbourne or something or Carlton. I'm not sure. Someone will have to let me know who Essendon's playing in a behind closed doors thing. But it will be really interesting to see round one, what results happen, what kind of performances you get from these players like Joe Danaher that you've mentioned, because he could be anything this year. He could play 2 games and kick 2 goals, or he could play 22 games and kick 80. Joe Danaher is one of the great enigmas of the competition.
And I know he's a former Bomber, but do you hope that he's healthy and has a great year?
I hope that he's healthy. Yeah, 100%. I hope that he's healthy. I couldn't wish injury on anyone, but I just hope he does not play well against my Essendon Bombers. Fingers crossed.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, and it will be very, very weird to see a Danaher lining up against the Bombers, I must say. And another factor that I don't think people have been talking about enough is the role that the hubs played last year, especially for the Victorian teams. The Victorian teams only playing, 4 or 5 games in Victoria for the whole season and then being away for, 3-4 months? And I don't think you can look really deeply into results and performances from especially those teams last year because the circumstances were completely different to what we have ever seen and hopefully completely different to what we see this year.
Right. And of course, there were lots of interesting things going on in the hubs last year, which have been in the tabloids. And exactly. I believe there was actually an interview on SEN yesterday about one of those things.
What was that about?
They had Damo was on there with talking about how things have changed in his household.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. That is really interesting. I don't like to talk too much about the personal lives of people.
Oh, I don't either. I saw a clip. It was like a minute-long clip where somebody had asked him about it and he kind of shut them down. But, unfortunately, I think those were some of the results of what happened in those situations. It's really sad that sort of thing happened. But really and you're right. I'm not getting into it. It's none of my business. It is having
really
been married once before. I completely get. It's not something that needs to be out there necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you just can't underestimate the damage people have had to their relationships and their mental health and their. There were probably heaps of things. These players living together for months at a time, this group of 40 young men, there would have been, I'm not saying physical fights, but there would have been fights between players, people having beef between each other. There would have been changes in relationships between players, splits between maybe factions within the team. And I just don't think that's been talked about enough, and results could completely flip from last year because of those outstanding circumstances.
And it all could have been about video games.
Exactly. Yeah. There could have been a last-minute winner on FIFA from someone in the Geelong Cats squad, and then Brian Myers might have completely lost it at Tom Hawkins, and they'll never talk to each other again. Not saying that's true, but you just don't know. Yeah. But something I'm really interested in that I want to talk about was you obviously being completely isolated from this big footy bubble that we have in Australia, and especially Melbourne and the southern states in South Australia and Western Australia. What's it like from the outside looking in, seeing media coverage and how it affects the game, fans' perception of the game? Do you consume much AFL media yourself?
I try to. I have a couple like Google alerts that get sent to me every day. So anything that has AFL or AFLW or Australian rules football or Geelong Cats in like the metadata in that article, they kind of compile into a group of articles. They email that to me every day, so I get that every day. So I'll comb through those, and I'll usually read 4 or 5 articles each day just to try to keep up with what's going on. I'll look at the AFL's website and now more the AFLW's website as well. I don't have the subscription to the Herald Sun, the Melbourne paper?
The Herald Sun. Yep.
Yeah. I don't have a subscription to that, so I can't read any of the articles on there. Or any like the Sydney paper. Once in a while I can catch an article on there. Yeah. But couple of them, they'll let me read 2 or 3 articles a month for free. Then you being somebody who's going to study journalism are going to probably be learning this firsthand, that, newspapers as we know it are disappearing.
Yeah.
By the time you are a veteran journalist, there may not be any newspapers anymore.
Exactly.
Everything's going to be online.
Yeah.
And those companies that are producing those news reports now are trying to survive because their advertising revenue has plummeted. Everything's online now. And if they put everything out there for free and people have an ad blocker on and that sort of thing, well, they're not generating that ad revenue. So they've started to put things behind paywalls.
Yeah.
Which, you can't blame them for doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just, I don't have the resources right now to spend, $30 a month for the online version of like the Herald Sun. I would love to be able to subscribe to that. And, I've never actually seen like the whole sports page from the Herald Sun to see, like in season, to see what all the write-ups look like. I mean, I see people, quoting, Mark Robinson and, he said this, or I don't even know who some of the other writers are with the Herald Sun, but I do try to read as many articles as I can find.
Yeah.
But then I'm still, I'm still doing, my job and that sort of thing as well. And, trying to get another, one last kid through college and taking my dogs for a walk and losing some weight and cooking dinner and doing laundry and, taking the trash out and that sort of thing. So,
yeah.
A few things going on.
Exactly. A few things going on. I think you're probably consuming more AFL media than me, AFL journalism than me, because to be honest, in the last maybe year or so, I've just kind of got sick of it. And this is true for general journalism. It's done to just generate clicks, but the anger about everything, like there's always like an outrage, and you just, in being in this bubble, you just get sick of it. I used to listen to SEN every morning, but I probably haven't listened to it for more than a year because it's just always some outrage about a little thing. Like, I don't know, maybe like I know a couple of years ago, Stephen May was injured and he was caught drinking a beer, and that was a massive outrage. Like, seriously, who really cares? Like just I'm in it to watch the game, but it feels like the actual game is just becoming smaller and smaller in the whole scheme of things, and maybe the AFL's grand plan to keep this 24/7, 365 days a year cycle of AFL going on.
Well, do you and this gets back to journalism in general, but you have SEN and you have things like CNN and Fox News and Sky News, and are there any other other news channels that have just 24 hours news in Australia?
Yeah, there's ABC News 24 as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they have a heck of a lot of time to fill up.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right that they'll find one little story and they'll beat the heck out of it. And I use this, I'm going back to, when I was in class, and I do this with my students, and it's going to come off sounding horrible here. So please, if you start listening to the story, listen to it all the way through, because if you stop partway through, you're going to hate me. And I tell my students this, so please don't stop listening to this little segment here for the next couple of minutes. Here in the United States, and I'm sure it happens in Australia, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't watch a whole lot of television now. Most of the TV I watch is on a channel called Acorn, which has a lot of British, Australian, New Zealand programs on it, because I'm just trying to get a feel for the culture and that sort of thing as well. So I've watched Mystery Road and Jack Irish, and there was one that was on called East West 101 that I watched, and City Homicide that was on several years ago. Yeah. And there's one called Brokenwood Mysteries, which is out of New Zealand, which I'm watching right now. Wow. So it's I tend to watch a few of those things, but as far as the news goes, here in the States, and maybe they do the same thing there, the news media will decide what story is important, and it happens quite often with when you have somebody who's missing or who's been murdered.
Yep.
And it's especially when it's a young female. And I the news media kind of decides that this story is important. There was a young lady about 10 years ago here in the States, and oh gosh, what was her name? Oh crap, I'm forgetting her name right now. Blonde girl. She was in Aruba that disappeared. Natalie Holloway was her name, and she disappeared back in 2005. She and one of her friends went down to Aruba after graduating from high school. She disappeared, never found her. Well, I've told the kids that I said, what I think happens in newsrooms at like CNN and Fox News and that sort of thing. I pull out a stack of like printer paper, just blank printer paper. And this is the part where you're going to hate me for a moment. And I said, I've never been in a newsroom where they've decided on this or the editorial board has sat down. I said, but it wouldn't surprise me if they have this stack of photos of these young girls who have disappeared or been murdered. And they say, which story are we going to look at right now? And they lay all the pictures down on the table. And they're looking at they pick up each picture and they look at it and go, hey, Bill, we did a brunette last month, right? Yeah. And they ball it up and throw it away. And they, well, this person, that person has a lazy eye, and look at her teeth, and she's the wrong ethnicity. And then they find this last person here, and they go, okay, this is the story that we think is important, and we're going to absolutely beat this story to death. I mean, like I said, she disappeared in 2005. They were still doing stories on her. They went back to Aruba a decade after she disappeared. They've never found her. They've never convicted anybody of. I don't think they know who probably did harm to her, but they've never convicted him. He's actually in prison in Peru, I believe, for having killed somebody else. But they tell you that this is the case you're supposed to care about. I said this, and it's like it's kind of like disrespectful to because I told the kids, I said, guys, I have to tell you something. Bit of a newsflash: ugly people get kidnapped all the time. The news media just shows you the beautiful people that get kidnapped. And like I said, this is sounding really crass and heartless, and I apologize for that. And I joke with my kids. I said, guys, if I disappeared, you'd be the only ones that know, because they're not going to talk about me on the news at all.
Yeah,
they can say an old fat guy. No, he doesn't matter.
Yeah,
he doesn't matter at all.
It's just people are more likely to be invested, according to these news people, in this beautiful young 20-year-old woman than Craig Wessels from a yank of the footy. And like they're more likely to be invested in that beautiful young woman than a me or whoever Bill down the street.
And again, television channels, they're in business to make money. It's a business. Yes, they're providing information, but bottom line is they're trying to sell advertising and make money. That's what they're there to do. Unless it's like National Public Radio. Is it ABC? Is like the government channel?
That is very different from the other news. It's much more not as kind of hyperactive and like all these stories about things that have gone wrong. It's quite a lot more kind of politics based, I'd say. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it's so. Yes, I think that's even happening with the stories you mentioned, like the private lives of the coaches who have separated, who are separating from their wives. I don't know how much that's been talked about. I know it's been brought up quite a bit, and it's been discussed. Hopefully not too much. But then you mentioned Stephen May. I remember that story when they were where people were upset. That he had like an injured foot or something, if I'm not mistaken, and he had and it's like, oh no, he was seen drinking a beer. What's the big deal? Is that beer going to prevent his rehab? Are the tendons not going to heal properly because of the malt and barley in that beer? And again, exactly. I don't know. Maybe does the AFL have some sort of a code of conduct which it says, hey, if you are, if you're out or injured, that you're not supposed to be drinking alcohol, or at least in public anyway. Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think the AFL probably doesn't mind or even likes these dramatic news stories, because it keeps people switched on to Aussie rules football, AFL. And an example I can bring up is people talk about the rule changes a lot, and obviously we know that the AFL makes rule changes pretty much every year. They've probably made rule changes every year for the last nearly 10 years, I'd say. And personally, I don't think that is they purely do that for the benefit of the game or to change the way the game is played on the field. I think a massive reason why they do that maybe they make their rule changes in December or whatever. December is a slow news time for AFL. You don't have many stories going on, middle of off season. But they do that so people are talking about the game still, and then when the end of March comes around and the season starts back up, more people are going to watch because this outrage has been generated about these rule changes, and they want to see what these rule changes actually do. Oh, I might tune into this Richmond-Carlton opening game because I want to see what this lateral moving on the mark might do, what all these different rule changes will do. Even if they don't change the game, I think they're just a big reason why they're put in is to get more eyes and ears on the AFL.
You know what? I think if you make that argument in your journalism classes, I think your instructors are going to be very impressed with you, because you're going. No, I'm serious, because you're going into this with a healthy dose of skepticism. That you're saying that they're making the changes simply to promote and to try to continue the relevancy of the game, because once the cup is handed out and the medals are handed out at the grand final and all the roar of Meatloaf's music has subsided, it's on to cricket, right? And is the NBL is played at that point in time as well, right?
You've got like A-League and stuff as well. Yeah.
Is that a really popular league, or is that kind of
no? You've got cricket, which is absolutely number one in summer, and then you've maybe got A-League, which is the soccer league here, and NBL maybe on that second tier.
Okay, so they're trying to have people not forget about the AFL. So I think that you bring up a very valid point. On why they're making those changes, because again, maybe 2 years later, they change that same rule back to what it was before. Yeah. And then people spend a couple months going, why are they changing it back? They just established this rule 2 years ago. Where's the evidence that this is a bad idea? And then people are going to hear this podcast and go, aha, that's why they're doing it.
Exactly. And I don't know if you've heard about the new rule of the man in the mark can't move around anymore. They've just got to stay in their spot. That's really, if you think about it, that's hardly going to change anything. But I reckon the media would have been talking about that for a long time. They're probably still talking about it now. And the AFL knows that it's not going to change much. It's not going to hinder the game too much. It's probably not going to help the game too much either. But it's going to get more eyes on the game, more money in the pockets of the AFL people.
But I would argue that it's going to harm bringing overseas viewers to the game, new viewers to the game who've not seen it before. Because, and hear me out on this, we're at the end of a half, or at the end of any quarter, or at the end of a game, horn has sounded. Somebody's got a 52-meter kick to win the game. Now you have one guy standing on the mark. Last year, you would have had that guy standing on the mark and 17 guys standing behind him near the goal doing their best pantomime trying to distract him.
Yep.
That's not going to happen anymore, because, you have some, dumb American like me sitting down to watch this game for the first time, and we're wondering, well, how can they score after the game is over? And then we're watching all these guys dancing around behind it going, what the hell are they doing? Yeah. Well, we're not going to see that anymore. So we're not going to be interested to come back and find out, well, why were they able to score after the horn ended, sounded to end the game? Why so if you only got that single guy standing there, or if the guy moves, what are they going to do? Give him a 50-meter penalty? Yeah. Which, I think they throw those things around, I think, way too much anyway. Yeah. I think, those, I think you could probably lessen those to 25 meters, that it might not impact the game as widely as it does. If you want to make a rule change there, change the 50-meter penalty to 25. Yeah, exactly. It used to be 15 meters. I'm not sure if you know that. Maybe it changed in the 90s or 80s. I did not.
And I think it might only be 15 in the AFLW as well.
No, it's 50. It's 50 in the AFLW.
Okay, right. Well,
there was
maybe
a game.
at the start of AFLW was only like 20 or 25 or something. I'm pretty sure it was shorter.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely raised a good point there. Like, I know teaching people I know from overseas or people, recent immigrants over here about the game, it's impossible to explain when you've got constant rule changes, and the amount of rules in the AFL is insane. Like, you've got something like basketball. Basic premise: you throw the ball into the hoop, into the ring, and a few little things outside the 3-point line get 3 points, 2 points for inside. Like, you've got a few little rules here and there, but there's like a rule for almost every step you take in AFL. The rules changing.
Well, I think basketball is a much simpler game, also.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
But, so yeah, I think the NFL is very similar to that also in terms of the rule changes. But yeah, but actually, not this weekend, but last weekend, I think it was round 2. There was a double 50-meter penalty in one of the women's games.
Yeah, I saw that.
Where it's just, where it's just, and that's, and part of the initial 50-meter penalty was, the person who was, getting ready to take the kick kind of just, they got the second one because they started running towards the person who was trying to run away from them. So instead of running in a straight line, they were kind of running at a bit of an arc towards them, and the umpire just was like, well, they're still in their way. Instead of making a beeline straight for the goal, they were kind of heading off towards the wing, and they got another 50-meter penalty out of it. And maybe there should be more umpires out there to just challenge them on that, and maybe turn it into a 50-meter penalty the other direction. Say, hey, we saw what you're doing. Turn around and march it back the other way, or at least give them a free kick to the other club. Give them the ball back.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
I don't want to change any.
Yeah, I agree, but. I don't want to talk about this for too much longer, but I just want to raise a couple little more points. We've had a couple guests on the show last year speak about rule changes. One of them was an AFL umpire. He's umpired more than 400 games, I believe.
Wow.
He goes by the name of Brett Roseberry. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's one of the biggest umpires in the league. We had him on episode 3, one of our earliest episodes, and he says something that's like should be blindingly obvious to everyone. The umpires don't want any rule changes. It just makes it harder for them. And that's why we might see so many bad decisions in a year. The umpires can't keep up. These guys aren't working this job full time. They've got other jobs. They might not even, they could easily forget a certain thing, completely forget that a rule exists in the heat of the moment.
So hang on here for a second. So you mean Razor Ray used to actually do a good job?
Debatable. Well, I won't get too much into umpire bashing, but I won't either. I just know that he tends to be the one that people like to give grief to. He's well known for making everything a bit more frivolous, I think it's fair to say. And another rule change chat we had, which was kind of maybe the other side of the debate, or maybe even a third side of the debate. I'm not 100% sure which episode, maybe episode 28 or 27 with Rowan Connolly. Now, this guy is one of the most knowledgeable people you'll get on AFL. He was in the same episode you were in.
I listened to your episode from last night where he was counting back. He was going through the premieres backwards.
Yeah.
That was insane. That was impressive.
Yeah. And he was on the same episode as you as well, the AFL Grand Final preview episode.
Right.
This guy's just got an amazing knowledge of AFL, Aussie rules, anything he puts his mind to, really. And he says, if we want the game to be in its best state that we can possibly put it in, we've gone too far with these rule changes. We need to change them back, because we have to make rule changes now because we've made too many, and we just need to get rid of some, maybe dumb it down a bit because it's gone too far. So that's another side of the debate, which is interesting.
I don't disagree with that at all. I do think, though, at this point in time, now that the research is starting to come in about CTE, I do think there needs to be, you're trying to protect the players' heads as much as possible. I think that you need to do that. But there's a lot of the stuff that happened to be in the rule books that probably that could go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's so many things that you can simplify.
Looking back at some of the the physicality from even 10, 15 years ago, there's a couple of videos on YouTube that I've shown to my kids before school or at the end of the school day, just to this is what I'm watching, guys, and they're watching Nick Rewalt somersaulting backwards over somebody and not getting himself knocked out, and the gentleman from Carlton that just retired this year, because it's like a very famous scene where he got knocked out and he's just laying on the ground and he's just clenching his fists, and you can tell that he's deeply concussed in that situation there. He just retired this past year.
Cruiser or Simpson? Which one was that, do you know?
Yeah, I think it was Cade Simpson, yeah.
Cade Simpson, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's who it was, yeah.
Yeah, like by no means am I one of those guys who gets all outraged about the state of the game kind of thing. I like to think that all sports change for the better or the worse, and for the worst, and things just evolve naturally, and the game will be more open in 20 years' time or so. It ebbs and flows, goes up and down for every sport, but I do think that we need to take back some of these rule changes, like the third man up thing. Who cares if a third man goes up? Just simplify a few things and then let the game just evolve naturally.
Why nominate a ruck?
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be a couple of tall guys, one from each team. You kind of show up. I'm going to kind of throw the ball in your direction. I'm going to throw the ball here. If you want to tap it to one of your teammates, you're going to go to where the ball is. That's easy. That's an easy fix right there.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much what we had. But I'm not sure if this was before your times watching the AFL, but it was originally created, that ruck nomination rule, to get rid of this thing where a third man would come into the ruck contest, not a ruckman, and kind of easily get it because he doesn't have anyone lining up against him. And they brought in that rule to get rid of that. But I don't think anyone was complaining about the third man up. It's just there to create this sense of outrage and get this AFL media cycle ticking over 24/7, 365. And I think we're kind of feeding into that a bit. So maybe we should move on from rule changes. Anything else AFL related that you want to raise?
Well, I did want to mention, one thing that's going on here in the U.S. right now, if I could. Because there's a bit of that we have here in the United States, and in we have the USAFL, which are a lot of Australian expats are involved in this, but then there are also a lot of American players who have discovered this game that love this game. I'm not going to be playing it. Okay, we've already established I'm shaped way too much like the ball to actually participate in one of the games. I can go watch. I can cheer people on. I can talk to them after the game. I'm not playing. But there are, we're at a point right now where there's the organization has begun what they're calling their Footy 5,000 program, where they're trying to get 5,000 people playing footy here in the United States. Okay. And right now we have close to 50 teams in the United States. We have 3 new, if we're able to play this year, if COVID allows it, we actually have 3 new teams that are starting in the USAFL this year. A second team in the Denver, Colorado area, the Centennial Tigers. And then there's a group near Dallas called the North Texas Devils. And they've actually coordinated with the group in Tasmania who's trying to bring a club there. They're using their logo with the Tasmanian Devil. And it's a sharp looking currency that they've put together for it. I mean, they've gotten approval from them, and the people in Tasmania have said, please, yes, use our stuff, get our message out there. And then there's another one in, and I've interviewed both the people involved with both of those. And the third one that I'm trying to interview them, we just haven't been able to nail out of time yet, is in Alabama, the Birmingham Bush Rangers.
Okay.
And so there's, And what I was shocked when I talked to James Henderson, who is the president of the North Texas team. He said that we talk about the Footy 5,000 thing. He said it's a tough hill to climb. He said because just in the Dallas, Texas area, there are 3,000 people playing rugby in just Dallas.
Wow!
And they're trying to get 5,000 people playing footy nationwide. So it's you got a lot of expats who are very involved in promoting the game here. It is growing, but there are a lot of communities that are just starting to have bring people out for a kick and kind of show them the skills of the game in several different cities around the country as well, up in Detroit and in Orlando, Florida, and actually the same town where my son is living. And I've told him, I said, as competitive as you are, I think you would love this game if you went out and tried it. So we'll see if he does it. So
just from your point of view, do you prefer? Would you prefer keeping it kind of the way it is, still having it as your own little niche, your special thing with a few other people maybe, or would you prefer AFL to be a massive nationwide sport up there with the big ones?
I don't. It would be great if it became, kind of like a professionalized sport. I think you would probably end up losing, quite a number of these clubs. They're not all going to be able to play at that level because they're all having to go out and do their own fundraising. They become not for profit organizations where they get donations and such to help buy uniforms and training gear and balls and such. The players, when they travel to go play in another city, from what I have gathered, most of them, they're responsible for covering their own costs for travel. So, if the team in Chicago is going to go play the team in Des Moines, Iowa, they have to pay their own way to get there. And not everybody can afford to do that.
Yeah.
And there's, I guess, the New York Magpies has over 300 people on their club. There's over 300 people as part of this club. And I think it's one of the biggest ones in the country. Yeah. And I haven't talked to anybody from that club yet, but I've wondered, I said, why not split it up into two clubs and then you got somebody in-house to play against? I mean, that's kind of what happened with the Denver, Colorado area and the Dallas, Texas area, where they did that sort of thing. But it's growing. Last year was just a lousy year all the way around. There weren't any games played here at all. But I still keep in touch with. I was able to actually sit in on a couple of the Zoom meetings with the Footy 5,000 group, and it was just fascinating to see the plans that they're making and what they're trying to get accomplished. One of the guys runs a store here in the U.S. that sells footy gear and Guernseys and bags and hats and scarves and that type of thing. But he sells balls as well and actual uniform stuff for the teams here in the States. Yeah. So, but it's going well. So, and hopefully it's going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I hope so for your sake. But one more thing, obviously, maybe 18 months ago now, you probably never would have thought you'd have thousands of followers on social media and all these a big amount of listens for your podcast, and you never, especially about Aussie rules football, that would probably be in your wildest dreams, just completely not even thinking about it. So my question to you, Craig Wessels, is what characteristics do you think you have, and why do you think it's become such a hit with people in Australia over here? Obviously, there's still lots of room for it to grow, but what do you think has lit that spark and got that connection with people?
I think that that I have. I think what I have done is that I've tried to. I'm not trying to do this just on the periphery or just on the surface and just scratching the surface of this. I've kind of it's in many ways it's kind of like a high stakes poker game, if you will. I've kind of gone all in with sport on this. I mean, I'm a huge baseball fan, but I didn't watch more than 6 or 7 innings of baseball last year. I don't think I watched a complete game last year. I watched a handful of games the year before. And, the Indians had, been in the World Series just a couple of years ago. They were playing for a championship, but the local team, their name is changing after this year. They're going to drop the name and come up with something else. Because
do you know what their new name's going to be, by the way, just quickly?
They haven't announced it yet.
Okay, right.
I've been hearing a number of different things. One of them is a name that they had years ago. They used to be called the Cleveland Spiders. I'd kind of like to see them go back to that one. I think that'd kind of be a neat logo that you could put on a uniform.
Yeah, why not?
But yeah, getting back to the question, I'm trying not to be patronizing to people when I engage with them. I have a genuine curiosity about trying to learn about the game. I'm genuinely excited in seeing the team that I support do well. I love watching good footy. Whoever it is. I mean, this weekend we talked about it before we started recording. The last few weeks in the AFLW there've been some fantastic games. The North Melbourne game this past weekend was dynamite.
Yeah.
What Fremantle did to Adelaide.
Yeah.
I tipped Adelaide in that game. I made a mistake there. Watching what Brisbane did yesterday in the second half of their game was crazy.
Yeah.
But I've fallen in love with this game. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And it's I found something as a hobby that I enjoy doing. I talk a lot at my job, and to me, this is kind of a decent hobby to join in with that. And, like I was saying before, I'm somebody who doesn't, go out. I'm not a going out to the bar type person. I had a father who was an alcoholic. I don't go to bars. That's not my thing. I don't have buddies that I go out and have a beer with or anything like that. So this is kind of what I do. And I actually talk to more people in Australia now than I do that live on my street. And I've lived in my house for over 25 years.
Wow.
And I talk to far more people in Australia than I do that live on my street.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
But actually, I wasn't sure if I was going to ask this one, but I reckon I should. I know it's not a normal episode, not a traditional episode. You might have heard Lockie O'Rourke ask this question to our guests at the end of the show. Craig Wessels, do you have a life philosophy? Any quotes you live by, maybe like a mantra or a little saying that guides what you do?
Well, in my classroom, and I'll send you the doc. In my classroom, I have on like copier size sheets of paper, I have over 450 quotations printed out and hanging on the walls in my classroom.
Oh wow!
It's and they started out really inspirational when I started doing this, putting them up over 20 years ago. And then as the years went by, I noticed they were getting more and more cynical. Oh. And then they announced they were going to paint the walls in my classroom about 4 years ago. So I had to take all of them down, and I printed them all out again, and they shuffled them all up. So I have a couple. One of them is an Oscar Wilde quote that I have right in the middle of my classroom, right in the front of the room, so the kids see it every day. That says, "True friends stab you in the front." Okay,
that's a good one. I like that one.
Yeah, but I have one that I'm actually, I don't have any tattoos. I spent time in the Navy. I was told by my grandmother I was not allowed to get a tattoo, but I'm contemplating getting one. And it's actually a quote from a movie. And it's actually my favorite film, and it's one I use in my government classes called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And it's this really inspirational guy as it goes to the Senate, to the legislature. And during one of the monologues he's giving, he makes mention, there's a line that he says that liberty's too precious a thing to be buried in books. And It's one that I'm actually contemplating getting tattooed on my arm. And I'm going to probably get the Reaper app before I get the tattoo, but I'd like to do that. And Yeah, because I have to convince my kids to watch this film because this film was made in 1939.
Oh wow!
It's a black and white film.
Really old.
Yeah, it's an old film, and I have to convince them that it's worth investing 2 hours of their time.
Yeah.
And I've actually had about a half dozen kids buy a copy of this film after they've watched it. It was that impactful to them.
Yeah.
It's
wow.
You get cheering at the end of the film. So yeah, those are probably the two biggies. But yeah, there's a lot of quotes.
That's probably some of the deepest life philosophy chat we've had on the podcast. Usually, people usually very casual about it, pretty kind of off the cuff quotes or philosophies they live by. But before we wrap up, got to get the plugs out of the way. Of course, where can people check you out?
Well, they can reach me. They can find the podcast on any of the podcast hosting sites. Just look for a Yank on the Footy. Or you can find it at a yankonthefooty.podbean.com. You can reach me at yank_on Twitter or to yankonthefooty@gmail.com. I'm on Instagram and on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm all over the place. So love to hear from you. I sent out on my mailing list, I sent out the notification about that I was going to be on the Triple M broadcast in Gippsland. And I've actually heard back from a couple of people today congratulating me, so that's kind of fun.
Yeah,
it's kind of fun.
Very fun.
Okay, one last thing, a little prediction.
Okay,
who do you see winning the premiership in the AFLW this year? They're a third of the way into the season.
Okay,
in the AFLW. Who's winning the premiership?
Jeez, so yeah, there are a lot of teams that are doing very well. You've got North Melbourne, Freo. Melbourne even has had good performances recently.
Brisbane.
I'm going to say it'll be a Fremantle North Melbourne grand final with Fremantle winning their first ever premiership as a club.
Sounds good.
What about you? Are you happy to reveal it on my podcast or our podcast?
You know,
keep it a secret.
I had it in an earlier episode, and I'll be honest, I don't remember who I had said was going to be there. I think I had it as I had North and Adelaide, but I'm beginning to think that might not be the case after having watched Freo play recently. I mean, I read a great article online describing how they just play this chaotic type of footy. Yeah. You know, that their kick to handball ratio was mind-boggling. It was over 2.5 kicks to one handball.
Wow.
Unbelievably high.
Unbelievable, yeah.
Yeah. It was just, I was shocked by that. It was just, you know.
What's the kick to handball ratio for a normal team? Do you know? Like on average?
Well, they said that the team that was the lowest was barely 1-to-1. I think they said it was Carlton. It was like a 1-to-1, almost even.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they were, you know, that some of them, I guess, must, you know, handball a lot more, but, you know, the way they described it, they just, you know, they said Freo will just, you know, will bomb it in there and just go attack you and try to take the ball away from you and go score. Yeah. And, you know, if it doesn't happen, they'll go back and get it and do it again. Yeah. Let's bomb it in there again. Instead of working their way down the field, they're going to try to kick it, you know, 40 yards or 35 yards or meters and try to move it up the field and go from there.
Exactly. Again, I encourage all of our listeners to watch the AFLW this season because you will definitely not regret it. And it was 100% worth watching. And I'd also say the same thing about Craig Wessels' podcast, The Yank on the Footy. Go check that out. I'm sure you've already listened to every single episode multiple times over if you're listening to this one. I'd like to thank you very much for coming onto the show, Craig. It's been a fun time.
Harper, I appreciate the invitation, Harper. Thanks so very much.
There you have it. My chat with Craig Wessels. Hope you enjoyed that one. I certainly enjoyed it myself. Hopefully you enjoyed that different type of episode, more opinion-based rather than life and career-based like our typical episodes. But I've got to say, that's our 5th bonus episode in lockdown, and that will be our final bonus episode. Because if I'm honest, I'm absolutely knackered from putting together and making all these bonus episodes. So I'm going to take a bit of a break. I hope you've enjoyed these bonus episodes, and we've got a big announcement, big things coming on Monday. So what's the date of Monday? Monday the 22nd. So keep your eye out for that, because there are big things coming in the world of Where Do We Begin. We'll keep the socials ticking over in the meantime. So check us out on WDWB Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and Where Do We Begin on Facebook, and Where Do We Begin on YouTube as well. You've got to get around that one. That's just about it from me. Hope you've enjoyed these bonus episodes, and I'll see you for that big announcement on Monday the 22nd. Thanks for listening.